Here we are sitting at your desk where we got together and recorded a bunch of episodes last year. I'm seeing these little sheets of paper. Remember when I gave you these sheets of paper?
Yeah, Little Brown Swiss House or whatever.
Chalet.
Chalet, my bad.
Yeah. You haven't cleaned here for a while.
Shut up.
No, it's like artifacts. The historian in me loves that you just left it untouched.
Oh, yeah, okay. We'll go with that. It's like archaeology. The further you go down in the layers on the desk, the more further back in time you go.
Right?
That's right, yeah.
There's history in here.
There
This
is.
Nice place you got. Okay, well, let's have another conversation. You heard about this Sentinel Island thing?
Sentinel sounds like a robot that you use to guard a place, but I have heard of Sentinel Island. It's somewhere in where is that? Is that in Asia?
Yeah, Bay of Bengal.
Okay, that's near India.
Yes.
Okay.
And the Sentinel Island, North Sentinel Island specifically, is the one that's in question for this conversation, is a part of an island chain that it looks like to me, the naked eye, is a part of another island chain that runs north to south, closer to Laos and Thailand and Myanmar. It wouldn't look, where it's sitting, it doesn't look like it would be a part of India, but a good chunk of it apparently is controlled by India, including this one little circle-shaped jungle-looking island called North Sentinel Island. And this is where you probably have heard of it before our conversation today. There is a people group there who are overwhelmingly untouched by modernity. They're not connected to civilization in any way.
Okay.
Where does that take your brain?
Well, they've seen airplanes. They had to have seen airplanes.
Yeah, about that, though.
What?
In 1953 or 56, India passed an act entirely dedicated to the preservation of non-contact with these people. I think that included air traffic. You can't go close. It's 5 nautical miles for any kind of boat. The whole idea was to create this non-contact bubble where they would not see or be exposed to the outside world.
Are they technically citizens of India?
Well, that's interesting. I dug into that a little bit.
Well, first of all, does this island, is it owned by India?
It's owned kind of by India, as much as it's ever agreed to be owned by India.
Okay.
I mean, really, doesn't somebody there have to sign off on it at some point for them to be Indians? And I don't think anybody ever has. So it's an island with a people group ranging somewhere between 40 and 400. That's how many inhabitants there are, but how would you know? It's thick jungle. You can't go on there. A few people tried way back in earlier times. Somebody violated the rules a while back with a helicopter and they fired arrows and threw spears at it. And so we have images of some Sentinelese tribesmen, but
The people on the island threw spears at helicopters.
at a helicopter.
A
Yeah.
helicopter.
Yeah.
Okay. Like they got close enough to try to land and they thought they would hit the helicopter, or they were just like, hey, you're 1,000 feet in the air and I'm going to throw the spear at you.
The image I saw, it looked like it was a closer swing than that. You have your computer there?
I do.
Just pull that up. Go Sentinel Island helicopter or something like that. I think you'll be able to see the images.
Okay.
They pop up around the internet once every year or two when people are talking about interesting things and mysteries of the world. This Sentinel Island comes up. Did you get it?
Oh, so you got some guys here on the beach. These are the warriors. Okay, we've got big spears, got longbows. They have longbows. Okay.
Is that an atlatl that the one guy has there?
I can't tell. It's kind of grainy. And so, yeah, so this is a low elevation shot. So somebody got pretty close. And this is the head-on look of somebody aiming a bow at you, a longbow. And not only like aiming it at you, but this is somebody that knows how to use it. It's like the longbow's at an angle. You can just kind of tell that this person knows what they're doing with the bow.
And if you saw Avatar 2 recently, you know that longbows are the ideal weapon for taking down helicopters.
Yeah.
I learned that recently.
I haven't watched the movie.
I can't miss.
Yeah,
Every single time.
I haven't watched that
Why
movie.
even have a helicopter?
I'm also seeing a picture of a boat here, and it looks like a pretty modern boat, or at least the construction is made out of wood.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna throw a flag on the fact that they're never contacted, because I'm looking at the construction methods of this boat. Now, I just recently went to Peru, and I saw a boat, like a dugout canoe right there on the side of the Amazon River.
Yeah.
and it looked less modern than this boat that I'm seeing that apparently was taken from a photo from the air. I wonder if this boat like drifted up on the island or something.
Here's what happened. I know what picture you're looking at. A few years back, some fishermen got whipped into a storm and ended up beached on Sentinel Island. They were immediately killed, and efforts were made to recover the bodies. Now, my theory is, and I don't know this off the top of my head, I'm sure you could Google it and figure it out right there. Those helicopter shots of people on the island, I bet that was authorities trying to verify that those fishermen were indeed deceased. So that boat might have been some sort of rescue craft or lifeboat kind of thing that ended up landing them on Sentinel Island. I know of 2 visitors, or 2 groups of visitors, if you will, who have set foot on Sentinel Island in recent memory, and that is one of the incidents with the fishermen. So I bet that's the boat you're looking at.
Really? Okay. Very interesting. So what are we talking about today?
Well, I want to go back to the very general question I asked you a minute ago. Where does that take you emotionally? Like, what questions does that prompt for you? It's a really weird proposition, isn't it?
Well, prior to 1999 or whenever The Matrix the film came out,
okay, all right.
I would say, it would be great to contact them, right? And, we probably have things that they, we've discussed this in the past, and you said something like, hey, medicine or something. What was your position? We could take the medicine?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked before about the ethics of reaching out to a people group, a civilization with reduced technology. The basic question is, well, do you go in there? Like, surely they have cancer. Everybody has cancer. Well, we have some treatments for cancer. How can we monsters withhold treatments for cancer and other diseases? We solved all of that, and they're dying from it. We could help them. Or is the ethical thing to say they want to be left alone? They are making their own way. They're solving their own thing. To show up to quote unquote help is to effectively end their civilization experiment, because it's over. The second the Stone Age meets the postmodern age and the advanced digital age, that's not a fair fight. It's not balanced. The one is just going to devour the other. So what do you do ethically? I think that's a conversation we were having a while back.
Yeah, I'm reminded of several things.
Okay.
I'm just going to tell you the thing. You know how everybody has their own life experience, and
yes,
different things come to mind. I'm just going to tell you a few things that come to mind. One of which is there's an old movie about the Zulu, I think, Shaka Zulu.
Sure.
And so, he's this warrior in Africa, and the British colonists come over, or the empire comes over, and there's this battle between these villagers and these British that have machine guns. And, Shaka Zulu is really good with a short spear, and he bangs his short spear on his shield. And, just this dichotomy between super sophisticated modern technology. They could smelt iron, and they can make steel, and they can make guns and all that. And you have this other side that has spears and stuff. That's interesting.
Yeah, the Boer Wars, like the Dutch as well in that part of the world.
BOER.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
It's an interesting clash.
Yeah, that's interesting. The other thing it makes me think about is, I don't know where I saw this, but there was a documentary about this one tribe. I think they were in the Amazon, and part of their tradition, the men would wear these things. Here's a content warning for parents that may be in the third chair. Like, if you have kids around, I'm going to give it about 5 seconds
I
here.
think I know what you're going to talk about. Let's give them 7 seconds.
7 seconds.
It's a doozy. Yeah.
7 seconds.
It's an image that's not going to go away.
Okay.
Assuming I know what you're talking about.
Is that enough time?
Is the second word in what you're about to describe sheath?
No.
Oh,
it's not.
Okay.
Well, it's the penis gourd.
What? How's that different from a penis sheath?
Well, there's this, it was just called a penis gourd. I don't know if it was National Geographic or if it was whatever it was, but I remember watching a documentary.
I've never had a microphone conversation about penis attire in my entire life until right now. And I want to thank you for that.
Well, there's this tribe, and there's different things that people wear, and some tribes, the females will wear skirts, like grass skirts or whatever, but this particular tribe, there's this thing called a penis gourd, and the men of the village will take there's a long gourd that grows near where they are. They hollow it out, and they take a string and tie the string around their neck, and they hold the string out, and they put the gourd over their penis, and they tie the string to the end of the gourd, and so it just holds it there like that. Have you ever seen this?
So, again, we cannot content warn hard enough for talking with the kids, but I genuinely want to understand. So I'm going to ask question 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Is the idea that this functions almost like foot binding or other long-term
No.
alterations to physiology where
No.
they're trying to change the penis?
No, not at all. It's just a way to conceal for modesty, is my understanding. And so,
But then how does the
yeah, I don't
string factor in instead of like a belt? I don't
know. I just feel like you're judging mighty hard right now. This
No,
is a cultural thing,
Okay. I'm
and if you
sorry.
don't understand this,
You're
that's
right.
on you.
You're right.
But one thing that's interesting is the place that took my mind is there was a moment when a group of researchers, or I don't know if they were linguists, what they are, they went into this village and they had do you remember back in the 80s, there were these old plastic flashlights, and you would open the top of the flashlight, had an old lamp, like a filament lamp,
Yes.
and you'd put 2 C-size or D-size batteries in there.
Like
and there's-
the cheapest generic
Yes.
red flashlight.
yes.
Yeah. With a white switch with little lines across it to grip on the
And a
thumb.
little plastic lens-like thing over the lamp.
Absolutely. Yes. We were talking about the same thing.
Yeah, and
Sure.
I'm not so sure that modern children will know the flashlight we're talking about, but you know what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
And so,
Or torches
yeah,
for our listeners in the UK and UK influenced world.
yeah, and so the people that were there from I'll say the modern world, which, you know, who's to judge, but you know, the people that had access to plastic injection molding technology, we'll say that.
Okay.
They had a flashlight, and one of the villagers took the flashlight, took the batteries out, flipped it over, and used it as a penis gourd. And it was his attire, and it was socially acceptable in his tribe that this is how I conceal myself. And what's interesting is there didn't seem to be any, golly, I don't remember where I saw this, but I remember thinking, oh, that's weird, because you know, you would think that there would be all kinds of social awkwardness things going around with like what type of gourd you use and how big is it and all these kinds of things. And it just wasn't a thing to these people. The issue was, I need to conceal myself, and this gets it done. And I remember thinking that was fascinating. And so it was this strange blend of modern technology being plastic injection molding and, you know, the social norms of this particular village. I just remember thinking there's a lot about this I don't understand. And the little boy in me wants to laugh and go, ha, 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 look how funny this is. I mean, there's obvious jokes there.
I mean, come on. That's reasonable. I mean,
Yeah, it's
anything
pretty funny.
anything that's farts or parts of the body you cover with clothes will always, like, there's going to be some impulse that people have to chuckle about that a little bit. But also, hey, the fact that people cover those things with clothes means that that's a cultural text. It means that there's a cultural shared, agreed upon decision that's happening there, meaning that it's full of meaning.
But what was interesting is that the fact that they were covering that part of the body,
And nothing else.
yeah, and nothing else. It was almost like, I don't know. It was very clear to me that there was something about that I didn't understand that was accepted within that specific localized society. And I thought that was fascinating. I thought that was wickedly fascinating. So anyway, that's the second thing I thought of. And the third thing I thought of, which is not what I thought I'd be talking about immediately after talking about the last subject,
Fair enough.
was the book Through Gates of Splendor. It's by Elizabeth Elliot. It was actually a formative book in my life.
A famous missionary's wife.
Yes. Jim Elliot was killed in Ecuador along with 4 other people. There were missionaries. Let me just look up their name here because I don't want to get this wrong.
Nate Saint.
Yeah, Nate Saint's he's the one that comes to mind. He was the pilot. So Jim Elliot, Pete Fleming, Ed McCully, Nate Saint, and Roger Udarian. And so these 5 guys and their families, they went down to Ecuador and they said, hey, we're going to reach this unreached people group with the gospel of Jesus, right? We're going to tell them, we're going to give them the good news, which also means telling them the bad news first.
Yeah. So for the outsider, and I understand it's easy for people like you and me to just take it for granted that that's something people have just heard and know about. We're talking about the message of the kingdom, the idea that
We're all
Jesus
sinners.
is the long promised Messiah, who is the one who solves the human problem of sin and death and suffering and ick and all of that stuff. And that somehow what he does by dying on the cross and being resurrected deals with the brokenness of humanity.
Yeah,
Broad strokes, that work okay?
you accept the grace that's given freely through Jesus. And so the three things that are easy to say, God gave grace. A buddy of mine, Steve, says it that way. So this is what makes Jesus different. Jesus is God. He actually died, rose from the grave, and that his grace is freely given. There's nothing you can do to work for it.
Sure.
Yeah. And
Okay, we're on the same page.
We're on the same page.
Cool.
And so they, being Christians, were like, I'm going to go down here to this unreached people group, and I'm not okay with the little, as soon as you're in Sunday school and you're like, but what are the people that don't hear about Jesus, Yeah. They're like, well, I'm going to go let them know. Right. And so because there's a conflict that happens in your mind when you're like, but, they don't know about the good news. I need to tell them the good news. And so these 5 missionaries went down, and it did not end well. They had a very specific plan. They were working on the language. It's an interesting book.
Wodani, is that the tribe?
Wodani, yeah. Known locally as the Auca, A-U-C-A. And so I read this book just before I left college, and I went to Ecuador shortly after that. It was huge for me, and because, I don't know, the one thing that Jim Elliot said that I thought was fascinating, and it resonated with me, is he is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. That's something I think about all the time, even now. Also, another thing I loved about the book, in the book, Nate Saint, who is the pilot, he developed this really cool way. He had this really cool yellow airplane. He developed a really cool way using drag, and I think I've told you about this before. You fly the airplane, and you have a bucket on the end of a string. And if you slowly let the bucket out, if you can imagine an airplane flying straight, and you imagine a string rolling out of a bucket, drag will affect that bucket differently at different altitudes along the string, right? Well, the bucket obviously has a lot of drag. The string has less drag, and you have tension up there at the airplane. You have tension on the bucket all the way down. So Nate Saint developed this really cool thing he could do. He could bank the airplane, have the string coming out of the airplane, and he could slowly ply out that, or roll out the string until the bucket reached the ground. And if he's at a certain bank angle, he could fly in a circle in that bucket. He could drop things on the ground. When I say drop, imagine a bucket. You look up and you see a bucket, and you see a long string and an airplane going in a circle around it, but the bucket's not moving. It's stationary, and it comes all the way down to the ground. And because he manages the drag and the drift and all these things, the airplane velocity, because he's a good pilot and he's got a feedback loop, which is him looking at it as he's flying, he could communicate, so to speak, with the ground. He could even put a telephone on the ground with a wire all the way down, talk to people on the ground. He could put it. One of the things they did is they put a chicken in the bucket. You put a chicken in the bucket and you drop it down. This is how they initially made contact with the tribe.
Yeah.
Drop a chicken in the bucket, and they even put some stuff in and they brought it back, and they got really excited. Then they went in to visit these people. They developed a way to land the aircraft on a small little beach along a river, along an oxbow in the river, and they were ultimately killed. So it's fascinating. They were killed with spears.
Yeah, and there's a description even of how the interaction went south, that there was some initial promise of positive contact, even some maybe exchanging of gifts or something that looked like it was going well, and then things just flipped. And somebody went and procured one of the spears that was used. Those are still made. And
I have it right here.
Oh, you do? That's the same one I have. I think somebody must have sent us both of these at once, and I'm embarrassed that I no longer remember who, but for years now, I've had this in my office, exactly that.
Yeah,
spear.
I remember the letter, because in the letter they said to maintain the balance of power between Alabama and Wyoming, I'm going to give him a spear as well.
Well, it was even before, and it's even after.
Yeah, I'm embarrassed that I don't remember who sent this as well, but it's really cool because there's a string on the end, because you throw the spear, and then you can unwind the string, and then you can pull it back.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting. They found some of the spears that were in the men. They found some of the pages of the Bible that the men had left in that area, and so it looks like the tribesmen had put things on the spear that they intended to use to kill the specific individuals, which is wild. This is really. I'm confident we've talked about this before. I feel like we have.
Yeah, we have.
But I love it, so here I am again.
Yes. And the long story short is eventually there was forgiveness between the people who killed those men and their families. And ultimately, that message of the kingdom of God and all of that ended up really taking root in that particular community. Now, if we are to be honest about the history of missionary movements and all of that, you have to also acknowledge the things that didn't work, because there's some awesome, amazing stories where things went great and there was just tremendous benefit for everyone. There were also incidents of exploitation, imbalance, weirdness. On the whole, I think right now it's very popular to treat any kind of look back on the missionary movement as just this total racist, colonial debacle. And that's just not fair or true at all. At the same time, then, of course, folks who really cherish those memories are going to want to counter with, what? No, the whole thing was beautiful and perfect. And the truth is, I think the missionary movement is something that went right alongside the rather exploitative colonial economic movement. And it was the missionary movement, not governments. It was the church that went and really held back the full exploitative impulse of the resource grab that went along with 19th century colonialism. A great example of that is in Jamaica, the story of William Knibb. Did I ever told you about William Knibb?
No.
Yeah, I mean, high schools are still named. The biggest high school in Jamaica, I think, is still named after William Knibb. He's their Abraham Lincoln, liberator of the slaves.
Really?
Amazing dude. Put everything on the line to side with the people of Jamaica, with the locals, with the natives of Jamaica. And business hated him. Government hated him. He was an English guy. His church got burned. His home got burned. There was a bounty on his head. He's hiding in a ship just offshore for more than one night, trying not to get killed. But ultimately, he's the one who was looking at it and was like, we cannot own the people of Jamaica. You can't own humans. You can't buy, sell, and trade people. Slavery is an abomination in the eyes of God. Slavery is incompatible with the Bible. This has to go. And Knibb won. But the forces of government and business, they wanted to keep that relationship as long as they could. So it's stories like that where you got to look back and realize that it's not a very accurate depiction to be like, well, these, gold grubbing business people, they partnered up with Jesus people and went and enslaved people and all of that business. Yeah, I can point to some examples where that happened. But for every one of those that you can bring up, I think I can show you 10, 20, where it was the missionaries who gave up everything, all comfort, everything, because they saw not just an opportunity to go reach somebody with what they believed to be true about God and Jesus and all of that, but their sense of God-inspired justice was offended by what they knew to be happening in these places of initial contact that were occurring in the age of colonial boom. They ended up being the ones who went and looked out for the people who were getting exploited by greed. And I just don't think they get enough credit. I think they get crapped on a lot, and so that's me sticking up for them.
I know people like that today.
How do you mean?
I actually know them. Like people that spend time in other countries that we can't talk about.
Yes. Yeah. I know. Yes.
Yeah, you can't talk about them because if they're in a different country and they're doing something,
Mm-hmm.
and they might be working a job locally, but they're actually missionaries. And one of the things they're trying to do is they're trying to make sure that people in the local area are treated well. And that's enough to say about that. But
yeah, because there's literally nothing we can say because you and I are both connected to the same kind of stuff.
Because they could die.
And we absolutely can't even give hints or wink, wink, nod, nods about it.
Yeah,
but you and I both know what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's cool.
I think so too. And I think that brings us back to the Sentinel Island deal. You have to imagine that that's going to capture the attention of somebody, that somebody who pictures the adventure missionary travels of Dr. Livingstone, I presume, in the 19th century, and Zimbabwe and Victoria Falls and just all of that legendary stuff. People who were raised reading through Gates of Splendor and know the story about what happened in Ecuador. It could be really easy to look at that and fixate on the adventure, high risk, high adrenaline aspect of that.
You could also say that specific method is not particularly effective. I say that with weight because we know some of the ancestors of some of these people, like grandchildren, and like we know them.
And we say that from the comfort of these microphones.
Absolutely.
We're not even doing this live. That's how low the risk is. Like anything we think is stupid, we can just make go away.
Right. But I think there's an argument to be made on like what is the most effective way to reach people and what is the purpose of reaching people?
Yeah. And Jesus anticipated that question. I just got done doing that whole Book of Matthew thing on my podcast.
Oh, Book of Matthew thing.
I don't know. What do you want to call it? It took a long time. It was a lot of work. But even there, Jesus' commissioning of the people he sends out with this message about, really overwhelmingly, it's a message of justice. He sends them out and he's like, hey, you got to be shrewd as serpents and innocent as doves here, because things are stacked against you, and the people who are doing evil, exploiting other people, abusing their power and position, they're very entrenched and they're very good at what they do. And you guys who I'm sending out, he's just got like a bunch of fishermen and small business owners and stuff, like total motley crew, ragtag crowd that Jesus had gathered and that he sends out in about the 1/3 mark of the story of the Book of Matthew. He sends them out and he isn't just like, go be good. And by just your supreme decency and not swears, everyone will know that I'm the Lord. It's not like that at all. He uses the word shrewd. You got to read the room. You got to look at the situation and think about what you're doing. Well, those guys bumble through the rest of the book, but we know that after Matthew, history and tradition and other parts of the Bible tell us they looked a lot more shrewd. And what they did when they went out after what the Bible holds out as the death and resurrection of Jesus did not look the same, depending on where they went. Now, all but one ended up meeting the same fate as Nate Saint and Jim Elliott. I mean, eventually, you're saying a message that is a complete paradigm change when you go out with that particular message. And Jesus said that wouldn't always be greeted well.
Isn't that interesting that Christianity, I mean, as soon as I say that, people will be like, but the Crusades, but like
Christian counterexample.
Yeah, it's an excellent counterexample. But for the most part, Christianity has spread by people being killed as opposed to conquering.
Yeah, that's why it caught on. There's this, I don't know where he's at now, Washington State, Baylor. He's been in a few different places. Rodney Stark is a sociologist. I've read all his stuff. Absolutely.
I don't know who that is.
It's okay. He's a guy who focuses on why things stick historically. I mean, there were 50 messianic claimants we know about in the time frame of Jesus. Tons. Josephus, the Jewish historian who was a contemporary of Jesus, he gives us probably 20 stories of different people. I'm the Messiah. I'm raising an army. We're going to start from here and we're going to kill Rome. We're going to kill these guys. I mean, it's crazy. I've done videos on all these different claimants holding themselves out as Messiah, but only one stuck ever for all the people who've claimed that. Well, Rodney Stark's question as a sociologist is, how the heck did that happen? Why that one? Why that guy? I really like his look at it because it's not like a evangelical, apologetic, make you feel good about your beliefs kind of book. It's just sociology. And he's got a series of arguments for why he thinks it caught on. One of the big reasons is they didn't have the sword. They did not have the opportunity really for 400 years before you really start to see things begin to flip toward Christians having any kind of authority. And they didn't become a meaningfully persecuting group ever until about 700 years in pockets, when they started to meld with government. And so to Stark, that's very compelling. He's like, they didn't catch on by killing all of their rivals. They caught on by outliving their rivals, by when plague hit, compelled by their understanding of how God is and what he would want. We just can't leave everybody to die. So we're going to stay here, and anybody who's here, we're going to nurse and nurture back to health. And so then Stark goes through and he has chapters where he analyzes how, what percentage of increased survival that kind of nursing or attention would give, given what we know about what diseases were each of these, made up each of these different plagues. And it's fascinating to just see somebody put math to it and be like, all right, the plague hit this percentage of the empire. That's this many people who would have been affected. The death rate in general without care seems to have been about this. With care, it seems to have been this. And we've got all of these primary sources saying that Christians hung in. That means when those cataclysmic events occurred, either Christians caring for Christians, which promotes the growth of Christianity, or Christians caring for non-Christians, which would be compelling for the non-Christian, like you stayed and risked death to look out for me, that would result in the proliferation of Christianity. Stark views a lot of those moments as being kind of quantum leap jumps in Christianity gaining a foothold by living out its stated values.
I like it. Yeah, I really like that. As you were sitting there talking, I was sitting there thinking about the Shema. I think it's interesting in Deuteronomy, it's all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. But in Matthew, when it's requoted, it's all your heart with all your soul and all your mind. So that laying down of your strength, I'm kind of reading things in between the lines that aren't there.
Sure.
Yeah, I am. Let's be honest. But I think it's interesting that the mind component, the mental component is brought in. And I don't know, people are one with logic. And the logic goes something like this. Oh, you're not asking for anything. You're actually just helping me? Why? Mm-hmm. That doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the counter logic that ends up making it work.
Yes. And then
it's upside down.
Right. And that brings us back to your question about the shrewdness, Jesus' word there, not mine, or efficacy of the strategy we're talking about that the Sentinel Island thing got us into. Does it really feel to the recipient like you're just doing something for them in that kind of a circumstance? Or would the people of, let's say, Sentinel Island, let's go away from the Ecuador example. Let's say you and I went around some churches and raised some money. We printed up bright yellow T-shirts that say, Matt and Destin mission trip to Sentinel Island 2025. And we wore hats and we did a mime show, like all the things that they used to do in the 90s.
No, let's make it puppets.
Trips. Let's go with puppets, a very dramatic puppet show. Oh, it hurts. It hurts. But let's say we did that. It's not going to work.
No, wait, no. Let's think about it a different way.
Okay.
You and I are on the island.
Okay.
We're on the island. Okay.
So we're in violation of international law and Indian law.
We are from Sentinel Island.
Oh, okay.
North Sentinel Island.
Okay.
And we're there and we're sitting by the fire.
Yeah.
And we're like, hey, man, I think tomorrow I want to go hunt some pigs.
Yeah, I do.
Look at my new arrow. Look at this. Do you see this?
Yeah.
Dude, I've sharpened this for so long. Look how sharp this thing is. Touch it.
Yeah. Oh, it's very poinky.
Poinky?
Yeah. That I
would say pointy.
No, my daughters, they mingled two words when they were kids, and so they couldn't say pointy, and so it ended up being poinky. And anything that's sharp, we still call it poinky.
No, we're on the island now.
Yeah, they don't exist in this reality.
Yeah.
I hate this reality now. But all right, it's pointy.
Pointy, yeah. Okay, so
great arrow, dude.
I'm thinking about tomorrow going out and shooting a pig with my arrow. Are you in?
Yeah, we should jam some fruit in its mouth after that and put it on a spit and rotate it.
I'm game, dude.
Yeah, that's what I want for tomorrow.
It's way better than all this fish.
Absolutely.
You want to go? Let's go.
Yes.
Okay. We sleep. Lots of jungle sounds.
Wait, do we pray to tribal god before we go to bed?
No, we're not even.
We got nothing.
We don't even know.
No concept of that.
We don't know.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
All right.
So we get up.
Yep.
We're going hunting. Hey, dude, wake up.
Oh, is it pig day?
It's pig day. Let's
Wonderful.
go. All right. So we go.
Don't forget the new arrow.
Oh, yeah. The pointy one. Yeah.
No, I got the pointy one.
Okay. So we go out.
Yes.
And we start on our pig hunt.
Wonderful.
Are there pigs on this island?
Let's say there are.
I really want to know now. This needs to be rooted in facts because of how factual this example is.
They got to have fat. They got to have protein. So
that's true.
You can get fat from fish head.
Can you get fat from fish head?
Yeah. Yeah, like a fish head stew will produce fat. But coming up with fat is one of the tricky things on islands. But that's why you get like Hawaiian barbecue, because lots of different pig species can do well because they can root around for anything in that kind of environment, and why you don't get larger game than pigs.
Okay, so we're kind of out towards the edge of the perimeter of the island.
Okay.
We're still in the under canopy.
Okay.
And then we walk out, and then we see on the horizon a boat.
Okay.
It's a big boat. It's like a container ship.
Wow.
What do you think about this big thing that you and I just saw on the horizon? What do you think about that? Now, like in this reality, I don't know. Our parents have talked about boats and flying things, so
there's a story handed down from grandparents about flying objects that used to go right over the island all the time.
I think they've got to be smart. They know.
But we've only seen that once in our lifetimes. Only one time has one of these flying objects appeared. But we saw it plain as day. I'm telling you, Island Destin, I was there that day, and I saw that flying thing before it left. That was real, just like our grandparents told us.
And it was loud and terrible.
Yes.
And we hate it.
Yes.
Do we hate it?
There's a couple of the kids from the younger generation who are uncomfortably obsessed with it. But that's going to be the downfall of society. So we're going to preach hard against that. Yeah, we hate it.
That's how all the things work.
Yes,
it doesn't matter that we're on this island or if we're like here.
You know, it's true, man.
Interesting.
Yeah.
We just rally around the thing that we hate together. Interesting. Okay, I don't know where I'm going with this example. It's just kind of interesting to put
the shipping container shows up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
How do you feel about that island, Destin?
I don't know. I mean, that's big. That looks like a craft of war. It's bigger than ours. We have this little bitty thing that we sometimes go out fishing in. That thing's big.
Mm-hmm.
I feel uncomfortable around that thing, and I don't like it. I just don't like it.
Yeah, it's powerful. It's using technology I have no chance of understanding.
I don't see any rowing or sails.
Yeah, how do they do that?
Yeah.
It looks like magic. Again, do not mistake my little role playing here as being that I think these are unsophisticated midwits. We would go onto that island and immediately die given the tools they have. We have no cultural memory of how to survive like that, even with our fancy educations. We're not going to live out a robust, happy life like they're going to be able to pull off on that same chunk of ground. It would be torture for us. We would not know what to do. We would not succeed the way they've figured out to succeed. They've got a billion shortcuts. I don't think these are idiots. I think these are competent people with solid core aptitude and ability at the level of the brain. But come on, look at how big that ship is. If I can't touch it and poke at it and take it apart, if I don't have time with it, I can't just figure that out from a distance. It's just intimidating.
Interesting. And I think that communication barrier or that experiential barrier that's there, as long as we just don't let that thing penetrate that barrier, we're good. We have an enemy and we understand it to be an enemy, and we don't have to worry about getting close to it and all that kind of stuff. So I think if I was a person in power, I think it would be really important to tell people, hey, you have to keep the barrier up. Like, keep the barrier up. The last thing we want to do is communicate with those people. That's the last thing we want to do.
So interesting thing happened. I was reading something a while back about a guy from Sentinel Island. Something happened and he ended up on a mainland hospital. He learned Hindi on the hospital. I think this was generations ago. Like, we're talking decades and decades ago. And then returned to Sentinel Island? Maybe.
Really?
I'm not sure if he went back or if he went somewhere else, but I think he went back. And there was a lot of interest, apparently, in going to interview this man, because I'm not aware of anybody understanding at all the language of the Sentinelese. I don't think there's any possibility of verbal linguistic communication at this point. But there was a guy some time ago who could have served as the, what was the dude's name when the settlers came to New England and they met a guy and he spoke English?
Wasn't Squanto. Oh, wow. Dude, what was his name?
Squanto.
Was it Squanto?
Yes. Thank you for knowing my discipline better than I know it. Yes, that's the guy. So you could have a situation like that where just inexplicably you've got this liaison between cultures, between languages. It could fast forward everything. And I don't think any of that interview ever occurred. But I could certainly see how somebody in the anthropology world would be like, this is the greatest prize. It'd be like interviewing someone from the distant past. We have to get this interview. We have to do it. And ultimately, I think the strength of the law and the enforcement behind that Indian Protection Act from the 1950s or whenever probably prevented such an interview from occurring. You understand the appeal, right? Like what we could even learn about humanity if you could get that conversation untainted, untouched before all of the robots and all of the technology and all of that contact happens. If you could get a meaningful, mostly pre-contact interview with someone from there, what could you learn about our distant past?
Have you ever read the book Brave New World?
Yes, I have.
Okay, there's a thing that happens in this book where you have this person in the modern world. And I would say it's a dystopia.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So it's a world where
This is
they're
Aldous Huxley, right?
yes.
Okay.
It's a world that's so civilized that they plan out every person that is to exist, and you are rated according to your capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of like if we were to maximize, is that even a word?
It worked for me.
You know what I'm trying to say? Everything about society, and we're like, hey, you're a beta or you're an epsilon. Like, we're gonna score you based on your capabilities, and we're gonna plug you into certain jobs. You know, that's how we're gonna do things. There was this individual that went to America, and he went to I think it was New Mexico. He went to a reservation, and he was allowed to observe this tribesman. And this guy was doing all these really strange things, and he's like, what on earth is happening? And it was weird because this guy was more in tune with his humanity. The tribesman was more in tune with his humanity than this modern person was. And it was interesting. It was just like, I didn't really understand it. I remember getting to the end of the book and thinking, what was that? I thought it was rather interesting. The other day on the way home, I've been inside a lot. I've been looking at screens. It's the winter. So I've been doing all kinds of work. I've been working with CNC machines. I've been using my brain a lot. But I was driving home the other day, and I had somewhere to be at a certain time. And I looked at the river, and the sunset was beautiful. And it was beautiful an hour earlier. But because it's the winter, the sunsets take a long time. And I was like, when's the last time I got out at the river and just walked down to the river? So I got out. I just blinker on, pulled over, got out of my truck, and then I started running back towards the bridge. And I couldn't get a good view of the bridge or the sunset from bridge number 1. I had to go to bridge number 2. And to get to bridge number 2, I had to run across bridge number 1, and there was no shoulder. So I had to run basically in traffic on a really skinny bridge. I was like, I'm going. And so I went for bridge number 2. On my way to bridge number 2, I crossed a dead deer that was on the side of the road, 2 sofas that had apparently flew out of somebody's vehicle. It was awful, like litter and stuff. And then I finally got down into the mud on the riverbank, and I could hear the birds. You noticed, when we've been riding together, I've been looking. You're smart. You've seen me look at the birds every time we're driving.
Yeah, of course. Me too.
Yep. So I finally got down there, and I looked at the sunset, and I looked at the birds, and I took some pictures, and I thought to myself, why the heck have I not done this more? I live here, but I've been inside all this time.
Mm-hmm.
Do I really have it better? And so that's another thing this makes me think of. You got these guys on the beach with their bows and arrows and their spears. I think it's pretty cool, because there's something about stepping on the riverbank next to a mussel shell that's been opened by a bird, and the mussel's been eaten out, and just watching that. There was something cool about that. And I feel like I've gone too far. I feel like I have, what's the word? I feel like I'm very self-centered, and I think that my world is extremely important sometimes, and it's really not. Am I making any sense at all?
Massive amounts of sense.
Okay.
I live somewhere beautiful too. I picked it. It was on purpose. The last 2 places I've lived are the 2 most magical places that I could ever imagine from when I was a kid. Yellowstone National Park and the Black Hills of South Dakota. Those were the places that inspired all my curiosity and interest. This is what my childlike image of draw a mountain would look like, draw nature. I would just draw a kid version of those 2 places. I love them. And this stretch that I've been in, I've been going pretty hard working on some stuff for various projects and really pushing things, YouTube and podcasting, just lots of work. And so I'm down there in my basement and got my headphones on so I can't hear things that other people are doing, so I don't get interrupted. And I stare at that glowing rectangle, and I stare, and I stare, and then I read some books, and then I talk into a mic, and then I stare at the rectangle, and then I read some books, and then I talk into a mic. Days will go by. I'm like, wait, what are you doing, dude? You moved here because of the beauty that's right outside your window, and you keep that window closed so the glare doesn't cause problems on your precious glowing rectangle. And then I will just blow things off on zero notice. I'll even tap out of an appointment if I have to, and I will get in my vehicle and I will go be with the fish in the mountains. It's this abrupt kind of, no, I have to address this now. It can't be, I need to reconnect with this someday and make a new habit. I have to go now when that impulse hits me. Am I understanding you?
I think so. Which is why I think that it's important to get more in touch with that side, which is why what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this water bottle.
Oh, dude. Ugh. I hated that.
And I'm going to cut the end of it off here. And I made you a penis gourd.
Thanks for picking a 2-liter.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I thought that would be funny.
That was pretty funny.
It's see-through. That wouldn't work. Here's mine. That's a joke. I think we as people in the West, and I've got a laptop. I've got so many modern things within arm's reach. I also have this spear that someone sent us. All this stuff is within arm's reach, and I think a certain amount of comfort's great, but at some point, I think it's good to think more like the people from North Sentinel Island.
This episode of No Dumb Questions is brought to you by Stamps.com, and they wrote the tidiest, niftiest little thing here at the beginning that I think really explains it well. I'm going to just read this. When every person, moment, and penny counts in your business, you can't afford to take any of them for granted. Stamps.com gets it because for the last 25 years, they've been helping businesses like yours save time and money so you can focus on your business knowing Stamps.com has all your postage needs covered with premium discounts and great rates.
So I would like to create a mental image here. I think it'll be a useful way to to frame your thinking. A long time ago, I made a website, and it was one of the first websites I ever made on the internet. It was called Godzilla for Hire.
I was hoping that would be the name.
It was called GodzillaForHire.com. I don't own that anymore. But what we did is we were poor college kids and we didn't have a lot of money at all. And we decided what we would do is we did have a Godzilla doll. Sure. And I had a Sony Mavica camera that went to a floppy disk. And
I know the camera.
I was like,
yes,
you know the camera. I was like, I'm going to take pictures of this Godzilla doll doing stupid stuff. And then I'm going to offer to hire this out to people. And it was actually the first internet award I ever received. Somebody emailed me and they're like, hey, your website's so good. We would like to give you an internet award.
Was it just the internet award? Was that what it was called?
No, it was like, I forget what it was. It was like a comedy award or something. And they gave me an image that I could post on my website with HTML. That gives you an idea of where we were at on the internet. So anyway, the way we did this is we would put like a picture of a little chef's hat that we had folded out of a napkin on top of his head, and we had like a spatula, and we're like, hey, Chef Godzilla for all your chef needs. And then we had all these little things that we put glasses on him and gave him a calculator, and we're like, hey, Godzilla is an accountant. He can do your taxes. And we did all these things.
What was the part where you made the money?
Let's not make it weird, Matt. Just let me go with my story. And so,
yeah, no, please, yeah, do. No, this is a good idea.
We went through all these different things. It was really quite funny. And then the last thing we did is we popped off one of the Godzilla arms and we put a hot dog in there. And we said, hot dog for an arm Godzilla for all your hot dog for an arm needs.
That's right there in the name, Doug.
It's genuinely funny. And we're like, we don't know what your hot dog for an arm needs are, but if you do need that, Godzilla, the hot dog for an arm Godzilla's got you covered. So
we'll meet, nay, exceed your needs.
Now you're probably wondering why I'm bringing this up while we talk about Stamps.com.
Weirdest thing, yes.
Yeah, but oddly, it actually works because what I want you to do is when you think about postage that you have to put on something, I want you to think of Stamps.com because it's got you covered for all your postage needs. See what I'm doing there? So
barely. This is an ad. Like, people hopefully want to get back to the part where it's a show. You did this whole run up. That's literally the worst payoff in the history of the program.
It's like a Norm Macdonald joke. So good. No,
No, it's not that good.
it's not that good. The moth joke? Oh, I thought it was good. Okay, anyway, so
That's the one.
yeah, but when you think about postage, you need to think about stamps.com because that's what they do. Let's say you got to ship 1,000 of something, okay?
Okay.
Like if you go buy a stamp for each one, that's a lot of money, a whole lot of money.
Yes.
But
Yes.
stamps.com, they've worked it out where you can actually get lower fees on postage. And that's a big deal. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Well, I do. You're making it sound like it's this great big hypothetical. What if you need to send out 1,000 things? It's not hypothetical because we have used this to send stuff out to patrons on 10-Minute Bible Hour, on my YouTube channel, stuff like that. And so I remember when Camilla got all set up, she's got the little scale and made this little corner shipping area in our little goofy in-home office. And I thought it was going to be this massive weeks-long project. And the kids just sat down one afternoon and they got a little assembly line going, and the postage thing was cake. And it was so much cheaper than the bids we got to go and take it somewhere or ship it in the traditional way. It was awesome. It was an incredibly simple solution for a thing we needed to achieve.
Yeah, it's that simple. If you've got a business and you need to ship stuff, you need to be thinking about stamps.com for all of your postage needs. And I know the mental image that
there
just
it
came
was.
through your head. There it was.
Yep.
So
It worked as a Godzilla doll with a hot dog coming out of its arm. That just makes me think of stamps.
So here's the here's the offer. So set your business up for success when you get started with stamps.com today. Sign up with the promo code NDQ for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and a free digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to stamps.com, click on the microphone at the top of the page, and enter the code NDQ.
And look, I know that automatically there's a bunch of people who are listening who have their own businesses. And it's a pretty obvious proposition for that member of the third chair because you're sitting there right now and you're running your shipping costs through your head. And you're like, well, would I save money on this? And they're saying here that it's up to 84% off of USPS and UPS rates. So yes, probably you would save a lot of money with this. But Destin, before we get back to talking about the thing, what about the people who don't own businesses? How is something like this going to be useful for them?
Anybody that needs to ship out a lot of stuff, just go for it. Stamps.com, use the promo code NDQ, and it's like having a little post office in your office. All you got to do is have a printer, a laptop, set everything up. You can ship stuff out, save money. It's the way to go.
Yep. So again, to set your business up for success, or you for success if you just want to ship a bunch of stuff, you can get started with Stamps.com today. You can sign up with the promo code NDQ for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and a free digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, click the microphone at the top of the page, and enter the code NDQ.
Matt, I think I need the last word here because I know what people are going to think when I say it.
Oh, okay.
Go to Stamps.com for all your postage needs.
I think that the people at Stamps.com are about to see a nearly inexplicable spike in business. I mean, there's a decent chance you're just going to get a call and get offered a job, just as a heads up, because
know.
that connection is so strong. It's undeniable.
It is.
Great job, man. No, great job.
No, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Okay, Gord joke just now aside.
It's pretty good.
It was a pretty good joke.
The reason it's funny is because it's transparent and it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work at all. Yeah, that didn't come through on the microphone, but it's really ineffective. It's just kind of distorting and weird. It's just going to be weird for everybody. I'm probably not going to wear it, just as a heads up.
I thought it was funny. Yeah, go
Okay,
ahead.
you're good. We talk about the Sentinel Island thing. It's an interesting thought exercise. And so the conversation goes where I'd expect it to. You imagine, what would it be like to be there? What would it be like to be a fisherman who gets washed up on shore there? What would it be like to be an Indian legislator in the 1950s, coming off of everything with the Indian independence movement and the values of Mahatma Gandhi that shaping culture and society? Well, how do you apply all of these values and all of these things that you want for yourselves to these folks who live on this island?
Oh,
What do we do?
interesting. Oh, so you're saying, I don't understand the politics of this. You're saying that India was gaining its independence at that point in time from the UK. And so whoever came up with this, did they the impression like, hey, we're doing the same thing to this group? Is that when this happened?
Well, surely it had to have
When
informed it.
When
right?
was the law passed or whatever?
1956, 1953?
Was
Somewhere
it
in there.
really?
Yeah.
Okay, that's
So,
amazing.
So, I mean, you've got a generation there who's been thinking about this stuff an awful lot. And here you've got this tiny little, I mean, numerically of no consequence people group. They're no threat. They're no real benefit. I mean, it's like a little town way out in the sticks, except it's on an island and they've never really met anybody from the mainland. So what do you do? Well, I think the ethically consistent thing in their mind is probably what they did. So cool. I dig it. And I like working through the thought exercise, you and I, of, well, okay, what if you see it from this angle, this angle, this angle? What would you do?
Going back to what I was saying earlier, that I was going to make a joke about The Matrix in 1999.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I remember that.
Had it been in 1999, I would say, oh, well, let's take them technology so they can do things better. Now, I don't want to infect them with social media.
Yeah.
So
Oh, can you imagine if we just led with like TikTok? Here you go. This will give you a pretty good idea of what's going on outside the island. You just use this device and just kind of swipe here.
you've been in a
There you go.
place
Good luck.
where Americans are in a village in Africa or South America, and you've been in a place where the American is uncomfortable interacting
Uh-huh.
with a villager.
Mm-hmm.
So they lean on the technology crutch. They pull out the phone or they pull out the camera and they take
Sure.
a picture and they say, hey, look at this picture I just took of us. And then the children will start looking at take a picture of me. I've seen it play out many, many times. And unfortunately, I've participated in that because I was like, well, if I can, I've been,
Yeah, but unfortunately, I mean, come on, pictures, that's human. It's totally understandable why you would do that. It's a point of non-spoken human communication to look at an image, celebrate it together, point at things. You got to cut for yourself some slack. That's you trying to connect with another person, and you don't have a lot of tools to do it.
it's interesting
You use
though,
what's
isn't
in
it?
your pocket.
Thank you
But
for
the
the
medium
grace.
is the message. The medium is the message. And if you'd pulled out a sheet of paper and drawn a picture of the two of you together, that means something very different than, check this out, click, look what I just did, snapping a picture with the phone in your pocket. It's a different thing.
Mm.
So we game it out from a whole bunch of different angles. But let me bring it back to this. Should we go status quo here? Or should somebody go and talk to these folks? The world is what the world is. Maybe it's time. Maybe there's so many benefits they could receive that are being withheld that it's incumbent on the rest of the world to go and help these people.
I don't know. What I think is interesting is there's a telescope they're going to put up on a mountain in Hawaii. And I remember thinking, oh, it's a great place to put a telescope. But there was an argument made by a local person that says, here's the deal. We've got one mountaintop. We have one mountaintop here. It's Mauna Kea. Is that how you say it?
Oh, okay. So, yeah.
There's telescopes up in this area, but we have one pinnacle of this mountain. Once you build something there, it's done. Like we've done it. We've taken that away. And so that's the problem here. Once you do this, it's done.
Yep.
And you can't undo that.
Yep.
And that's the problem.
Yep. So much of what I would say has been ugly, thoughtless, and unfortunate about the age of expansion that just burst out. Technology hit a certain point, and the dam just broke. Like this, I mean, the whole second half of the Earth untouched.
What is the Star Trek
What if
thing?
we found a third half of Earth right now, dude? Would you not go?
You'd go, yeah.
Yeah, I have to know. They have different animals there. They got like kinds of ducks that nobody knows about yet.
They have potatoes?
Yeah, you have to see the new kind of ducks.
Well, let me ask you this. In Star Trek, there's I'm not a Trekkie, but it's called the Prime Directive, right?
Yeah,
What
yeah.
is the Prime Directive?
I think, is that the instruction that is Starfleet goes out? You're not to engage with any pre-warp drive technology civilization.
We need Bobak. That's
Yeah, of course we do.
yeah.
But if you got a pre-warp civilization, that is the arbitrary line in the sand that somebody drew. And they're like, all right, if they're not there yet, we just have to let them play it out. We observe from a distance, but we don't reveal our presence and we don't mingle. Is that the Prime Directive?
that's my understanding. It protects unprepared civilizations from the danger of starship crews introducing advanced technology, knowledge, and values before they are ready. That's interesting.
That's interesting. Clearly, that's Gene Roddenberry offering comment on the crazed, expansive rush that pretty much wrapped up about the time that he was a young boy.
Oh, we're talking about colonialism?
I'm talking about when Roddenberry was a kid, the frontier was pretty much wrapping up. That was it.
Golly, man.
But I go back to the mountain thing that you're talking about. Right. You throw that telescope up there. Well, it's advanced humanity. We're going to see what's in the stars. Awesome. I'm really for that. I like the idea of launching one into space better, doing it from up there. But that is the one mountaintop you got. And once that's what it's designated for, that isn't going away unless it's by some sort of act of violence, which is a pity. Same thing when I look around the Black Hills, the West. I see malls, particularly of the strip variety, everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, I go to Branson, Missouri. I like to fish there in the winter. I drove through there for a day, and I'm looking all around this lake, and it's a pretty lake. It's a man-made lake, but also every hillside. Like, I remember a beautiful hillside from a couple years ago when I'm there. Like, that was the one place that kind of still felt like, no, housing development. So it's never going away.
I went to the place Tara and I lived when we first got married, and I went there recently. It was the first house we rented. And she's like, oh, my goodness, send me a picture. So I took a picture of the barn. I remember a little cat we had named Brimley would sit on this post.
Like the guy who recommends oats?
Yeah, Brimley. Yeah,
Cute.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and so
I think you've told me that before. Okay, I'm tracking, yeah.
it was great. And we went to the place where I remember this young girl would come ride a horse behind the house, and we didn't really know anything about horses. And it was just really interesting to see the place. But right at the end of the driveway, I remembered it to be trees, and I remember all this stuff. And there were several what I call McMansions.
Mm-hmm.
They were like little suburb developments. They're just thrown up. And it was clear that the runoff wasn't planned very well. And so there was like a little, they could have made it look pretty pond, but it was kind of grown up. And it's just like, this is where the low point is. And and I remember thinking, man, this was beautiful. And once you got to the place, it was still beautiful. But I remember thinking, this isn't great. And so I also remember someone talking to me recently. They said, hey, we went to a vacation. We went to an island, and this was a whole family. They took their whole family to an island, which I thought was amazing.
Wow.
And they said, hey, it was like a big deal. This was like our kids are about to go to high school, and we're going to have one last hurrah while we're all still in the house. And the dad, or I forget who it was, telling me, they said, yeah, most people when they go to this place, they go to this island, but now everybody goes there. So we go to this other place, and it's just quiet.
For now.
Yeah, right? Until everybody hears that.
Yeah.
Because when I heard him say that, what did I think? If I went to that place, I'd want to go to that island.
I'm not going to that dumb, crowded one like all the dumb idiots.
Yeah, exactly,
I'm going
right?
to that other one.
Right.
We watched most of A River Runs Through It the other day. Never seen it before. It's a fly fishing movie. I've never seen it before. It's rough. It's a boring show. I didn't finish it. Some things happened, and I was like, I'll come back to it, and then I never did. So that tells you what I thought of it. Maybe that made sense 30 years ago. It didn't move the needle for me. But at the beginning, it did a little bit because it's in Missoula, Montana. I lived in Missoula, Montana. I feel great affection for Missoula, Montana. They're talking about locations I know, the Blackfoot River. Last day I ever spent with my brother was on the Blackfoot River. Me and Adam Doty and my whole family and my kid brother. And it's a trout river. And we all put on snorkels and we snorkeled it. I didn't know how to fly fish back then, but I thought trout were beautiful and neat. I probably saw bigger trout that day than I've ever seen in my whole life. Snorkeling a mountain river with my brother and my childhood best friend. We lost a snorkel in there. So we're trying to battle back upstream and get the snorkel. And anytime I go back by Missoula, I'm just real sad about the Blackfoot River. Like getting out of that water. That's the last time I saw my brother. Last time we were all together.
Wow.
Right there, trying to battle upstream and dive down and get the snorkel from all the trout that were guarding the snorkel. Wonder if it's still there.
Guarding the snorkel.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's the Blackfoot. It's the first place I lived out of college. It's the first place, like me, identity place that we picked when we got married. This was neat to hear all of those points of commonality, but there's one line. There's no drone shots back then in these movies. I had clumsy helicopter shot of some kids running through a field. And the narrator says something like, And when I grew up in Montana, this is pre-World War I, it was a place of primal innocence. There was still dew on it. And I felt something.
There was still dew on it.
I felt something. Yeah, just, it was so big. It was so untouched. And the little dent they were making on it probably seemed like it was of no consequence. Missoula's different now. It's filled right up. But that's half of where my heart goes when I think about the Sentinel Island thing. Is where your heart's going with the, do you mess with it or do you not? Is anything really unspoiled? Is it nice to just imagine that there's something? I mean, one little, however many acres island there is somewhere that's just unspoiled. That feels pretty good. But now let me add this to the mix before we wrap up. We were traveling through the South the other day, right? And Camilla had an interaction with a lady who believes she has a gift of healing. She can just miraculously heal people.
What?
Yep. She was an unusual woman. It was an unusual interaction. I'm not persuaded that she actually has that ability. I'm not necessarily sure. I don't think
She
anybody,
specialized in like lower back pain kind of stuff. or-
leg lengthening and the head
Leg
cures,
lengthening?
Like that's the kind of miracles that crowd does.
Oh
right?
yeah.
And I'm enormously skeptical of such claims. That I don't practice that religion. Whatever. We don't need to get into it. So we're always polite when we run into somebody of this stripe, but she just went right up to Camilla and she's like, well, I'm a healer. So what do you need? What kind of healing do you need? Camilla was very polite. My daughter was very polite. Why would you be mean to this lady, right? Like, I'm not looking for a fight at the dressing rooms at Target. Like, this is what I want from life. So, no, we're good. Thank you so much. And we just kind of moved on. And then we were talking with some other friends and family and kind of having a little bit of a giggle about it. And I got to thinking about it. I was like, you know what, though? Like, how big of a jerk would you have to be if you genuinely believed that you could lay your palm on somebody and pray something or something, and they would be healed of their affliction? How big of a jerk would you be to keep that to yourself and not at least offer and try to give that away if you genuinely believed it? And so I came to kind of respect the lady in our disagreement, that this was kind of how she had found peace with that tension. Is like, hey, she believes I got this gift. I have to run it by people. I have to give them the option. Now, I know there are people in the third chair who are listening to us talk about this anytime we get into Jesus, gospel, Bible, faith stuff. And that's how they view what we believe here. I get it. I'm at peace with that. But the same way, though it was challenging, I got to a point of being able to muster empathy for someone who believes something I don't believe, that being this healing lady, and her impulse to say, I have to give this away. Surely someone who does not agree with you and I and our understanding of the world and God could look at us and be like, well, I totally understand why at some point you might want to tell somebody. Like, if you really believe this is truthful and life-giving and good, you'd probably want to mention it. So what do you do with that impulse that somebody might feel to give away something they believe is good and right and true to people who've never heard it, while balancing that with the fact that there's some degree of unspoiled and untouched happening there?
In my life, in my relationships, I usually build the bridge and then wait for the person to walk across it.
So you're proposing a 450-mile land bridge, a causeway to North Sentinel Island.
No, I'm still talking figuratively.
Oh, okay, good. That makes more sense.
No, like relationally, I don't hit people on the head with what I believe. I just let it be known in like the least intrusive way possible. Like, hey, I kind of over here. This is kind of where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
And then if people ask questions, that's cool. And then I'll have the discussion. But for me to say like, hey, I believe this and I think you need to think this. Like, that's a different that doesn't work for me. When people do that to me, it's off-putting and weird, and I don't like it. Yeah, I don't like it at all.
I have a friend who thought off-putting was spelled OFF-PUDDING. Like, oh, gross.
That's gross.
Yeah, that's gross.
That's off-putting. That's really good. No, I think just the way I do it in relationships is I just say, I'm here, you're there, cool. I still love you and like you.
Right.
And let's hang out.
Yeah, I like that vibe.
And then it's just a little more difficult to talk about when there's a literal island there.
Right. I think an important thing to note is there different Christian understandings of what that scenario actually means. There are some who would say God by his providence, like he ordains, he knows, he just knows, and he sorts all that out. Somehow, whoever is going to respond to God will respond to God. Okay? There are others who would say, like, no, it's a very volitional thing for somebody to respond to God, and you kind of got to help get them to that point through like
I'm laughing
persuasion.
at you just sitting here trying to like casually explain Calvinism and Arminianism and all this
Sure.
stuff. You're just like, yeah, I mean, like if you could just paraphrase it like this, it was
I
like,
mean, what else are you
wow,
gonna do?
This is complicated stuff.
That's all right when we talk about things. What we do. But then,
One thing I would say
yeah,
is I don't think it's okay to check your mind at the door. You have to ask these hard questions.
Yeah.
And you have to know where you stand on them.
it troubles me that as we talk, you are stroking the blade of that lethal tribal Ecuadorian spear. Like it's very foreboding, as though I've said the wrong thing
No, okay, I'll put it up.
because you
I'm
got
sorry.
that spear.
I'm sorry.
Okay, no, it's all right.
That is strange. I'll put that up.
Still, others would look at that and say, and there's stuff in the Bible about the physical created world being evident enough to tell the story.
The rocks will cry out.
Yeah, or Romans 1 that intones it like people can do the math. You can see it. You can reason backwards from existence to get to a point of being like, ooh, I think maybe somebody made this, and I think maybe they might be like this.
Are you familiar with the concept of the spearman? As I sit here with a spear.
Yeah, that it's a way to illustrate the infinite nature of existence. That if you go to the very last thing that is known and explored on the edge of existence of the universe, and you extend a spear into it, that I don't know, what does that mean? What are the consequences of that? I guess then that's the new end of things.
Yeah, and then you could do that over and over, and eventually you can rationalize yourself to infinity, like infinity in space, infinity in time. It's a big concept, and it's interesting because that has a lot to do with how I rationally arrived at, there must be a prime mover. I don't know. I think that's a very interesting concept, and it is a way that a person could get to some very, very big questions, and I think people should think about that.
Yes. And man, that could be episodes upon episodes right there. I want to chase that, but instead, no pun intended, I'm going to move toward the plane landing here. All these different scenarios that we've hypothesized about regarding the Sentinel Island thing and a humanitarian impulse, a religious impulse, a specifically Christian impulse, a curiosity impulse, an anthropological impulse to want to go meet these people and engage. Somebody ran this experiment. There was a guy a few years back who was of a particular stripe of Christianity where there's a big emphasis on, hey, they can't know unless you go tell them, who decided that he was going to take the risk and go to this island and try to make contact with the people of Sentinel Island in the style, as he imagines it, of the great missionaries of yore that he read about. So he goes to India. He documents a whole bunch of it. He communicates with friends and family, and he pays a couple of local fishermen to break the rules and take him to the island. He goes to the island, and he is keeping a journal, and he makes contact, and he doesn't get killed. It looks like there's even a light exchange of gifts.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Local fishermen are still there. As soon as it feels like that was enough, he gets back on the boat. He apparently goes away. He comes back again. I'm not crystal clear on whether he came back a second time or whether he made 3 trips. But on, I believe, the second trip, some sort of metal-tipped arrow got shot through a Bible. Time to go. Ultimately, the fishermen, he paid them to take him to the island and just leave him, burn the ships. Like, we're here. Let's see what happens. I mean, wow, what a crazy colonial metaphor reference that was right there. Wow.
Cortez.
That's a lot of layers. Accidents happen, and that's an interesting one. And later, the fishermen reported to authorities that he was killed and that they saw his body. Authorities then went to try to reclaim the body of this Chinese-American young man, missionary, and they were unsuccessful. So at this point, my understanding is that he is presumed dead, and his remains are on North Sentinel Island. But his diary made it out, or at least excerpts from it, and so people were able to learn some of what happened. And it sounds like it was a very ineffectual attempt to make the connection. I think that's the last time anybody's been to Sentinel Island, as I understand it. What do you do with that story?
Yeah, I don't know. I want to know what kind of metal's on the arrow. There's an engineer side of me. I'm thinking about the alloy. Did they make this iron from pond scum? Did they? You can do that, by the way. They can get
Really?
Yeah, it's really cool.
I did not know that.
And so you can. I'm just trying to think about how they got the metal. Number one. Number two, he broke a law, right? So there's a law that you can't go contact these people,
Right.
and he did it. The fact that there were gifts exchanged to begin with, and then afterwards, it sounds like an elder was like, "Hey, you've been talking to those people. You're not supposed to do that. We're going to get involved." It sounds like something like that happened. Maybe not. Maybe he did
Could
something
be.
stupid. Maybe they were defending themselves.
Yeah.
Maybe they were defending themselves in a really big way. And if somebody had done this to the Spanish when they landed way back in the day, it would have worked out differently in the New World, right? So,
Yeah. Obviously, those are very different scenarios because one came with power and one came with nothing. I mean, this is one kid showing up versus men in armor with guns and economic motivation. I mean, it's very, very different in terms of military threat, but in terms of cultural threat, I mean, when you're talking about a people group that small, that one guy, that's a pretty big deal. So this is interesting because I've followed this story as it's unfolded. It's intrigued me for a long time. And I've seen very secular-minded people who theoretically would not be sympathetic to the missionary movement almost come to the kid's defense a little bit. I've read Christian types who've been very, very critical of this young man, and a lot of stuff in between, because I think it's
murky.
It's ethically
It's a gray area there.
clumsy.
It's
And
like,
so,
huh.
yeah. So if you don't know what to do, leave it alone. I guess go with that as default.
I don't know, but I'm getting uncomfortable. Can I take this off now?
Oh my goodness.
That's a joke.
Yeah. Thanks for
To
clarifying.
be
that.
clear, I'm holding a bottle up to the microphone. I don't know, man. It's I don't have answers. Maybe it's in the immaturity in my thought at the moment. But I'm gonna have to wrestle with this for a while and go read about it for sure.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. This one to me.
You better believe I'm going to look up satellite data.
Oh yes.
I'm going to look up some satellite imagery to see what's going on. You know what?
It's obscured.
There's a NASA satellite goes, right? You can see where fires are all over the world. And that's, you can see where humans are cutting down forests and burning things. You can see where there's military conflict. You better believe I'm going to pull up that
Okay, there we
satellite
go.
data, and see what fires are on the island.
Yeah.
But I don't know, and I'm allowed to not know, right?
Yeah. I just think this is a fascinating story because of what it is. And it's a pocket of the world where you got people living as though it's a completely different time, cut off from all the good stuff and weird stuff about the world we've built. Super interesting. But I think it's also very interesting as it takes us to that Star Trek question of, well, what do you do? Would you just walk up and say hello? Or is that a massive violation? And it might be. Yeah, I want your thought on this question, and then I will finally leave you alone here. If we were to draw a line technologically, like the Star Trek universe did, pre-warp civilizations. So in other words, we're not going to contact civilizations in space that have not yet developed the technology needed to travel themselves to go make contact and discover other civilizations in space. That's where they drew the line. What's your line here? Let's say there are 500 more islands and they've all got different levels of technology. What do you think would be a line you could draw for this is where it's okay to interact and this is where you probably shouldn't?
Okay, that's amazing. You could draw it so many places. Do you draw it at electricity? Do you draw it at, but that's a hard one, right? Do
Yeah.
you draw it at engines? Do you draw it at smelting an iron, metal?
Yeah, we've had iron figured out for a long time.
A buddy of mine, he brought me a rock the other day. He's like, "Hey, this was found out on the island." I was like, "Well, what?" He's like, "Yeah, down there by the harbor. Go out there on the island and check this out." And he hands it to me. It's super heavy. It's a meteorite.
Huh.
I was like, dude, this is a meteorite. He's like, is that what it is? I was like, it's got to be. There's nickel. There's got to be iron and nickel and all kinds of crazy stuff in this. You know, if I found a rock like that, I would beat it into a spear immediately or a spear tip. I don't know. The line, where would I draw the line? Written language? Man, that's fun, right?
I think it's a fun exercise. And if we can't immediately jump to the obvious moral conclusion sitting right here, if it's not just immediately morally apparent to us, I think that does mean that it's at least a somewhat complex question. And it means that the what do you do with Sentinel Island extend lives by giving them technology that extends lives and improves nutrition and all of that, or do you leave it alone? I think if we can't come up with that prime directive technological line quickly off the top of our heads and it's not immediately apparent and evident, then what you have here is a bona fide conundrum that is just worth wrestling with.
What's interesting is, let's assume that the people of this particular island are great to each other.
Okay.
They treat each other well. They have something akin to rights that they honor amongst themselves.
Yeah, okay.
Then there's this other island, and that on that island, people are taken advantage of. Women are taken advantage of. Children are killed or whatever. You know that there's what you and I would call evil is taking place on that island. Is it weird that I almost am more compelled to go jump in? so, is that weird?
I mean, maybe they're working it out.
Right, because
maybe they almost got it whipped because, some post-warp civilization might look at us in 1859 and be like, they buy, sell, trade, and breed people. We just got to liquidate this. No, come back in like 6 years. We're going to have a big fight. We're going to start improving on this. And then you won't believe how much better it is in 100 years. Like, we're really getting somewhere here. We got a ways to go, but we're getting somewhere. You got to at least have some kind of awareness of how systemic these bad things that have been happening on this hypothetical island are. Which way are we trending? I don't know.
There are fires on North Sentinel Island.
I knew you'd look it up. And I knew you wouldn't wait until we were done recording.
Ooh, here's some old data, but there are fires on the northwest quadrant, and there's some on the far east. I wonder if they're different factions.
I wonder if they get along.
Yeah.
It's a lot of weapons.
Who came up with the
people
fire?
who never
How
get
do they
invaded.
make fire?
How do they make fire?
They
Dude,
rub
we
the
got so many
sticks?
more questions than answers. Surely they got, surely they thought of a bow drill. Surely, right?
No, it's something better.
Ferro rods?
It's better. Maybe one guy made fire and they just keep it alive.
Oh, yeah.
We could know that by looking at the data.
Then you're spying like a voyeur in somebody's undiscovered civilization, you jerk. Is that fair?
Why did you do this to me? Now I'm going to think about this island all the time.
Okay, boom, here you go. All the great old natural scientists, the philosophers of Greece, everyone you've heard of has some kind of illustration, some kind of scenario that they put in front of you. Plato's got his cave illustration.
Oh, so
right?
now you're Plato. I got you.
No. Have you heard the last two?
I'm
No,
joking.
we're cracking jokes about gourds and shit. No. But there's something that illustrates a difficult question that ultimately you can't help but ask because you want to know yourself. You can't help but ask because you want to know humanity and you want to understand what is good, what is virtuous, what is noble. And sometimes it's an easy question. Don't punch an old lady. It's not good or virtuous or noble. But this one? It's trickier. I like that there's a question here where some people have tried different constructive proposals to the question of Sentinel Island and what do you do with it. I like that I don't feel immediate, crystal clear, angry certitude morally about what exactly the right way is to proceed. It's just super, super, super interesting.